Welcome to the latest episode of Five on the Floor on the Five Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app, on Apple Podcasts, on Android, Spotify, or the Five Reasons YouTube channel. Make sure that you support our sponsors. That includes our friends over at All Pro Construction Builders. It's not hurricane season yet, but it's coming around. All Pro Construction Builders specializes in impact windows and door installations for residential and commercial properties. All Pro Construction, a state-certified, licensed, and insured general contractor. They service Miami-Dade, Monroe, and Broward counties. They use top-quality products that are locally made. Here's the key. They're family-owned and operated. You'll deal with the owner, great guy named Danny, from start to finish. It's a family business, as I said. 305-484-4429. That's 305-484-4429. They can give you a free estimate, help protect your home in less than 8 weeks. And if you mention Five on the Floor or Five Reasons Sports, you get a 5% discount. So again, it's All Pro Construction Builders at 305-484-4429. Also, make sure that you subscribe to Off the Floor. That's our Discord server. Link is in here in the description. $2.99 per month. Check out the description. We got other deals for you as well, which are for our listeners. So check it out. It's Off the Floor, access to 10 different channels, exclusive stage shows, and more. The most heat, information, and conversation. And now, today's episode.
Down the Biscayne.
Yikes. Five on the floor, ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing, you can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frogs.
Down the Biscayne.
Kept the floor playing, got it all band. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat we trust, it's power, have the guts. We're here to bring the heat, y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to Five on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, Alex Toledo, Brady Hawk, and others from the Five Reasons Sports Network. Also, make sure to subscribe to Off the Floor for the most heat anywhere.
All right, welcome back to Five on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick, the Five Reasons Sports. I got Alex Toledo. You can follow him at Tropical Blanket. We're actually coming to you between games. So the Miami Heat lose in Milwaukee, another double-digit lead blown, which is what we're going to talk about today. And now they're in Atlanta. So we've got our guy Eternal Bast in Atlanta. Of course, you know him from Playback and from our Discord server. He's going to be there covering the game. The Heat trying to get something going here, some kind of momentum before they have a home-heavy stretch. How home-heavy? 2 games at the end of February. Then they have 4 out of 5 the first week of March, they're home. Home for 3 more the next week, 2 more the next week after that, 3 more the week after that. So counting it up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 home games before the end of March. It's a lot. You can make up some ground. The problem is the Heat keep giving ground in these games. So we're going to give you some numbers. I'm going to try to get into why this is happening. And I don't know if anybody caught the post-game show last night, but typically Brady, myself, and Greg are on the side of just sort of letting Spo handle it. I think last night we each hit like a frustration level. And so I think we need to talk about this, kind of why this is the way it is, because there are some ugly stats that were put on off the floor today, Alex. This is not a one-year trend. The Heat have been among the league leaders, or I would say trailers, in terms of giving up double-digit leads several times in recent seasons. In this year, they're one of the 5 worst again. In that, you have to have a lead before you give it up, but they're not holding them. And that, again, it's not been a one-year thing at this stage. This is another stat, and I'm sure you could probably say this about some of the other teams, but this comes in from a Twitter account, Dion Joel Polo. Fun fact, if the Heat won all the games in which they led by double digits, they'd be the 2nd seed in the East, 40-15. Now, again, I know that you could probably say other teams would have more wins also, but it does seem like it's pretty dramatic here. And a lot of the other numbers speak to this. Again, not a one-year thing. And the other part of this, and I just want to introduce some of these stats before we get into how he tries to solve this. The Heat's current roster has been awful in the fourth quarter. The only 2 players who played well in the fourth quarter this year, according to the metrics on the Miami Heat, who got any kind of minutes, were Jimmy Butler and Drew Smith. And neither of them are available to the Heat the remainder of the season. I'll just give you this. This is the fourth quarter net rating for Heat players who have played at least 10 games in the fourth, okay? Because I'm not going to count Kevin Love, who has a 154.5 offensive rating in 6 minutes. Jimmy Butler this year, 15 games in the fourth, 8.1 minutes per game, was a plus 18.4 in the fourth. 129 offensive rating, plus 18.4. Next best, Drew Smith, in 11 games, 9.5 minutes, was a plus 10.9 on the strength of a 95.2 defensive rating. Haywood Highsmith, who doesn't seem to play anymore, has a net rating in the fourth quarter of plus 6.2. Everybody else is negative. Bam is -1. Okay, it's kind of where the team has been. Pelle Larsson has played some fourth quarters, -3. Duncan's -3.5. Nikola Jovic, we're waiting on a report about his injury. It looks like it's going to be a few weeks, -5.5. Tyler Hero, -5.5. Terry Rozier, -7.2. It gets worse. Jaime Jaquez has played in 41 fourth quarters, averaged 7 minutes in those games. His net rating is -13.5.
Good Lord.
And the new rotation players, Khalil Ware, 33 games in the fourth, 6.2 minutes, -15.9. That includes a 117.1 defensive rating. And then the three new guys in very small sample sizes have not helped because one of those they just got steamrolled. But Kyle Anderson, -29.5 net rating. Davion Mitchell, -38.7. And Andrew Wiggins, -50.7. But again, all with 4 games or fewer. So we're not going to get into those. What do you make, before we get into what Spoke can do about this, what do you make of those stats? Because it seems like the only guy who was any good in the fourth this year consistently when he actually cared was Jimmy Butler.
It's so fitting. It's so fitting that, that's the first thing you see in the numbers, that even with like kind of the sample size cut there with all the weird stuff that happened with all the suspensions, when he was playing and when he was engaged, even if he wasn't dominating, wasn't looking like playoff Jimmy or whatever you wanted to see, playing every game as hard as possible, right? He was still the ultimate stabilizer for them. And I know we've hit on that, ever since he stopped playing in games and they started suspending him. It's been a whole thing. Like, this has been a consistent theme, like there's no anomalies happening here. They are running out of gas in fourth quarters. There's a lot of problems going on when it comes to like these stats that you're talking about, right? Like the Khalil Ware one, for example, the easiest one for me to talk about there, and why his numbers are so bad is because the start of fourth quarters, when he is in there, there's no Tyler, there's no Bam, and he's kind of the anchor with a bunch of other guys. Like, last night, for example, the lineup was I think Terry, Duncan, Wiggins, Kyle Anderson, and Khalil Ware. And even though that lineup played, I think, just under 2 minutes in that fourth quarter, they got outscored by, I believe, 6 or 8, just in like a minute and a half or whatever it was. And I just think in general, they've had this problem for years, but now it's being put more under a magnifying glass because Jimmy is not coming in there with however much time, 7, 8 minutes left in the game, and stabilizing you, slowing down the offense, getting to the free throw line, making plays for others, playing defense. And I just think things kind of get out of control for them in the fourth quarter. And it's not just like, oh, they're making bad decisions. I think Tyler hits a certain point too. And it's not to excuse, anything. Like, I think last night he obviously had a great game overall, but there was plenty of shots down the stretch where you could have been like, okay, he probably could have found a better shot. And I understand it was a heat check type of night. He was feeling himself in his hometown, his parents sitting courtside, emoting after he was hitting tough shots. Like, I can understand how that could get a guy into that headspace because nothing else was going down for them offensively. Like, Tyler had to be the one to take the shots. I'm sure that's how he was feeling in his head. But yeah, like, they don't have a lot of threats out there. They're not closing with a lot of guys who can actually cause a reaction in the defense, who can create an advantage. And for as much as I liked what Wiggins has done, and he's not that guy either. He gives you occasional like relief buckets, but you can't give him the ball and expect him to create a play. You're not, they don't close with Duncan. So that's the other guy who causes overreactions. He wasn't having a great game last night, to be fair, but you just don't have that other guy who can take pressure off of Tyler and just create buckets out of thin air for you. Bam has looked better, and he's the guy who should have helped with that aspect last night. But, they were – I just think, like we talked about for years, Bam has a limited sort of offense. If you don't get him in his spots, you're back in the same thing where it's Tyler or nothing. I think they're reaching an offensive ceiling, and then the problem gets compounded when they're like, for example, last night they're playing this all-defense lineup with Tyler there, and then they're not creating any sort of good offense, right? They're taking shots early in the shot clock, or they're taking questionable shots maybe a little bit too early, you know what I mean? Like with 10, 11 seconds left when you maybe could have found something better. there's not a lot of great shots being created. And all of a sudden, the other team is coming down the court in transition. And then the defensive stuff doesn't even matter because you had Dame, Tyler cross-matched on Dame for like half of the possessions last night because your offense was so bad. So it's like, oh, you have this all defense lineup, and yet you have your worst defender matched up onto Dame, and it's all for nothing, right? Because your offense is so bad that it's putting your defense at a disadvantage. You have to do all this scrambling just to get everybody back in position. You didn't have Bam guarding Giannis last night. I know I'm making it more about last night, but I just think the lineups are putting themselves at a disadvantage. And then there's just no easy answer here. Like, it's not like, oh, play Duncan and everything is fine. Play this guy and everything is fine. There's certain decisions that you can question, like not playing Highsmith, right? Especially when Nico is out, especially when we've seen that Kyle Anderson doesn't really work well next to a big who's in the paint, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just think there's a lot of issues with the roster, and Spo is like trying to find an answer, and there's no answer. This roster is what it is. They reach a limit when Tyler is kind of like, when a team takes Tyler out of the game and it's just making him hit tough shots, they don't create easy threes because their best shooters are the ones trying to create the shots. Like last night, they shot. I was looking at the fourth quarter numbers just now, just an example. 16 jumpers the Heat were 3 of 16. You know why? Because they don't create good ones, and the ones that are quote unquote good ones are from questionable shooters because their best shooters are the ones creating the plays. Everything is kind of ass backwards right now because they don't have stable presence that they used to in Jimmy, which was the one kind of covering up all these same problems.
Let me get to a couple of things that you said here kind of quickly on this. I think some of this is who he's playing, okay? Particularly early in the fourth quarter. But I think some of this is also something that I've noticed in him as a coach over the years. And I think these two things have come together in kind of a real negative way this year, which is one, he doesn't have obviously the ideal personnel. So I give him some grace on that. He's playing Rozier, which at this point I just don't think should be happening in any circumstance. It's funny when you go through Rozier's numbers. It's not just that he's been awful in the fourth. Then you look; he's the only player who's a negative who's played significant minutes in the overtimes. Also, like it's like if you go past that, and it almost seems like in some of these lineups this year, he's being asked to carry offense at times. Now he's not being asked to do anything, but he was asked to carry offense, and that was backfiring. But I think the other thing that's kind of come together here is that Spo likes to let guys play through stuff. That's always been his nature. And this is interesting because this comes in, this was a tweet. Sometimes you get something interesting on Twitter. And this Biscayne Maine posted something about the most blown leads, which we also put in our Discord, and how a lot of Heat teams under Spo have been high on this category. A tweet from DoorDasher87 says, because he's stubborn and he leans too heavily into the law of averages. So he's asked to elaborate. So he says, analytically driven coaches have a certain stick-to-itiveness with their game plan, some more than others. Been on record saying this 5 times. Even if the shots aren't falling, he'll encourage guys to shoot play out of a drought rather than changing his process. Okay, and then he found a quote from Spo. You have to absolutely commit to whatever your process is and attack that process every single day of trying to get better, take steps forward without getting caught up in the immediate results that everyone wants to see. That's probably the biggest challenge. I'm going to give you one anecdote, which actually Spo and I got tripped up on once. During the Big Three era, I thought it was, and now he's going to tell me I was wrong again. It was either Mike or Shane. I believe it was Mike. Okay, it was Miller. That he basically at one point he told him to stop shooting. Okay, and I brought this up because he was struggling, and I brought this up. I think incorrectly. I cited the wrong player, whether it was Mike or Shane. Again, my memory is shot now too. Spo and I are both in our 50s, so it happens. Okay, and I brought this up at a press conference when Max was struggling, because Spo had realized at that point, okay, that you just tell him to shoot through it, play through it. And it feels like, and then he actually corrected me the next day when he saw me, okay, on the court at Kaseya Center about which I had the player wrong. But whichever it was Mike or it was Shane. The point is that Spo has come around to this philosophy of letting these guys work through situations. If he's gonna, he's gonna err on the side of maintaining, okay, and empowering. as opposed to restricting. And I agree with that general philosophy. I think most people do. If you're a manager, that is what you should do. You try to encourage. If you've seen a guy do something before, you try to encourage it. But there's also a point of like insanity is trying to do the same damn thing over and over and expecting a different result. And with Terry Rozier now, we are at that stage. And I also think that has affected some of these runs that other teams come on. He doesn't yank guys quickly. He'll let them play through it. This beginning of the end of third quarter, beginning of fourth quarter lineups, which you cited, we see it on playback. Like we see it. Like he's got
I mean,
assistants
we've been
right
seeing
there.
it for years.
But especially this year. And it's like he has assistants there who have to be seeing it too. And we say we're like, oh, this game's gone. Like you just know.
But that's
like
the thing. It's been the same problem for years, but now the problem is so like on
Jimmy
display
can't come back
because
in.
the Band-Aid is not there.
Right, correct. Because it was always us staring at the scores table and saying, okay, why is he waiting for the 6-minute mark? Get him in at 8 minutes. And then sometimes
Like betting
he
with
would
each
send
other,
it,
like what time in the game Jimmy's gonna come back or Bam's gonna come back,
and then
etc.
it'd be 9 minutes, and it'd be like and then he'd be sitting at the scores table for 3 or 4 minutes. And I know what fans are going to say here to this, the Jimmy sect, okay, of the fan base. They're going to say, see, that's why they should have extended him. They should have. But at a certain point, this build should not have needed a Band-Aid. Like, that's the thing. Like, and they had to go a different direction. They had to pivot the way they pivoted. Jimmy forced their hand. That's my view, okay? But that doesn't mean that we can't identify that it's a huge problem at this stage. That the Band-Aid is not there. The Band-Aid ripped himself off, okay, so to speak. And
I think he had some help.
Yeah, a little.
That's a different
Okay,
subject.
they ripped it off together. Okay, the Band-Aid has been ripped off, and the Heat are bleeding everywhere.
That's such a funny visual.
The Heat are bleeding everywhere. You've got, and I can't look. I'm looking at Tyler's number in the fourth quarter. It's minus 5.5. You know, there have been years Tyler's been their best fourth quarter player by plus minus. So this is by on-off numbers. So like this seems to be, I think, with Tyler, is that the desperation starts to hit late in games. Because of what you're saying. They can't get any offense going. And then if Tyler can make a 30-foot three, we saw it last night. So then it just becomes all on him.
And they just lost one of their other best offensive players who would have been a very nice, counter last night and maybe would have been closing if he
would have been closing. He would have been closing because I think what we've seen, and on the other side of this, I want to go through specific players. I don't think they can close with Ware consistently based on what they've seen. And I mean, my God, Jaime Jaquez. Like that number just jumps off the page because Spo was forcing the fourth quarter stuff with him early in the season. Now he's not playing him at all.
So much of Terry and Jaime together too. Oh.
That's been where it's at. But I think on before we get into specific players on the other side of this, I think that Spo, who is good at self-reflection, I think he's got to look at some of these runs, like quicker timeout, quicker yet pull them. Just if a group is not working. And I also come back to this, okay? I really don't understand what he's saving Bam for sometimes. I don't. He's a young man, 27, in elite condition. You're coming
especially
off
last night when he was like out of the game earlier because of the foul trouble.
For the foul trouble.
Yeah.
And that's my other thing about foul trouble that I never understand with coaches. I don't get it. The whole fear of foul trouble is the guy's going to be taken out of the game. Why take him out of the game? Like you're literally caving to what the official. You have a guy who is the defensive player of the year in your mind because Spo has said over and over he's the defensive player of the year every year, right? For him, right? You can't trust him not to pick up 2 fouls. You can't trust him to make the right decisions. And a couple of those fouls were ticky-tacky. Yep. Bam's not going to pick up those fouls late, and the officials are going to give him the benefit of the doubt. They're not going to foul him out.
Especially when he wasn't guarding Giannis.
Correct. So for people who say that we never critique, last night drove me insane. I as much as the game that Spo called the timeout, he didn't have because I'm not saying they would have won anyway. The Bucks when Giannis came back in, it was a steamroller. And again, the Heat had the game back to tied, and then they let it get away again after Spo put a reasonable closing lineup back on the floor and Rozier was out. But I got frustrated when I see these runs and I'm like, okay, it's like 3 or 4 possessions late that the timeout is called and the substitution is made. And I don't think that's giving himself the best chance in a lot of those situations. Anyway, on the other side of this, we're going to talk about specific players he could actually use to stop this. Although I'm with you, probably the player he needs is playing for the Warriors right now, and I don't know that that's going to change this season. And again, that player was not playing for the Heat, by the way. The player who's playing for the Warriors right now was not playing for the Heat most of this season. So let's just get
Pre-Pelicans he was, but that's whatever. That's a whole other thing. We don't need to get into.
Okay. No, we don't need to get into it. I just did. All right. Want to talk about a great spot for the 5 Reasons Sports Network. If you're into daily fantasy, you need to get into this. It's PrizePicks.com. Use the code 5. Put down $5. You get $50 to play right away. Legal in the state of Florida and many other states. Daily fantasy simplified. What does that mean? It's really easy. You just pick between 2 and 6 players together across the sports spectrum. And then if you get them all right, you win. I mean, that's how it works. And you win a lot, potentially. So check it out. It's PrizePicks.com. Use the code 5, FIVE. We'll be bringing back some pregame PrizePicks shows for the close of the NBA season and the NBA playoffs. So go now, go to prizepicks.com, use the code FIVE, or again, the Google Play Store, the Apple App Store. All right, so we talk about closing. Some of the fourth quarter numbers, which are horrific, a lot of them are the first 6 minutes of the fourth, I feel like. That seems to be the bigger problem. But ultimately, he gets to a final group for the final 6. So let me just ask you, let's do this yes or no, okay? At this point, is Kel'el Ware ready to close most games?
I might have to say yes, only because of the Nico thing. He might be in there by default because for as much as I appreciate like what Kyle Anderson can bring, I'm not ready to put him in that spot. Like I think I'd rather put to me, it's like maybe Highsmith is just that guy. You know, Spo knows what he can and can't do, and I know everybody was kind of like done with seeing Haywood at the 4. Guess what? If it's Haywood or Kyle Anderson at the 4. Playing next to Bam, I would rather have the guy who is much more confident taking a wide open corner 3 and doesn't take 3 seconds to get it off. Because they're like the Kyle Anderson stuff in the paint that he can give you, with Duncan cutting off of him and that stuff. That's like, in between these lineups. I don't think it fits next to another guy who's going to be in the paint like Ware or Bam. So with this whole thing, like I feel like Nico is somebody who was kind of poised to be maybe not an every night closer, but a most of the time closer. And now, I don't know how long he's going to be out, but it just doesn't seem like they not only like I agree with you. The problem has been for years is, until they bring back their main guys, those lineups are kind of a Pandora's box. It's a lot of chaos, and it's usually not a good type of chaos. The problem is, I don't think it's just like if you bring back Tyler and Bam with 10 minutes left in the game, I don't think that fixes everything either. I think they're going to hit that ceiling regardless. Now, that might help them. It most likely will help them if you bring back your best players earlier in that game. But I just think their closing lineup is not a good lineup either. I appreciate their starters, but once things get really tight down the stretch, guess what? Teams are not worried about Davion Mitchell. Do you want Davion Mitchell taking a bunch of wide open threes? Do you want Andrew Wiggins trying to create some, to be fair, some BS when it comes to the, like some of the pull-ups he takes, whether it's in the mid-range or from 3. Like, I like when he's attacking the paint. Sometimes he goes too fast, and that's where he ends up smoking layups. He ends up kind of going out of control and doesn't know how to decelerate a little bit once he gets to the rim. They're trying to make guys into something a step above what they are on offense.
Right.
And I think teams are calling the bluff, especially when you don't have your other 2 best offensive players out there currently on the roster, which are Duncan and Nico. I think it's all on Tyler. Then you have Bam trying to create, these contested mid-range shots, which are kind of hit or miss because he obviously can make them, but that's not like the most efficient form of basketball for them either. So it's just like a bunch of
I think you hit it.
You know what I mean?
But I think you hit it. Everybody's up a slot. Like in a perfect world, Tyler would be your 2 in that situation, your second option, and Bam would be your third option, and Wiggins would be your 4th. They don't have a number 1 right now. Again, I will argue they really didn't have one this season, but they had one in the past. And so that's kind of where they're stuck. So let me ask this then. We both agree Rozier can't play in any fourth quarters, right?
No.
Cannot.
But it's so compounded because he thinks he needs Terry's offense, and Terry's not even giving you the offense. So it's like, oh, I don't want to go into his all defense lineup because we don't have that much offense. Let's go to this guy who's making all the wrong decisions on offense. And I get why he's leaning with it. Like, oh, maybe we can get him back to normal. Keep giving him those reps.
That's what I'm talking about, the process. But that's what I'm talking about. His thing is if you just continue the process. But the problem
he's had a career of being a decent player, Maybe it's like, oh, he'll get back to who he is.
He has, but here's the other issue that I think Spo is in a little bit of a box with Rozier. Rozier is a rhythm player. He needs the minutes to work his way into it. There's no way he's going to be effective in this role. Like, we've all called for him to get less minutes, but him in this 10 to 15 minute a game role, he's not going to give you anything because he needs to hit a couple of those off rhythm shots to kind of get in a groove. You see him have these flurries. It's not really going to it might happen occasionally, but not very often.
The other thing, by the way, he was playing his best basketball like last season and the season before, whatever, playing off of LaMelo. And I know it was like not winning basketball, but LaMelo is a guy who can consistently create advantages. You know what I mean? He's always going to create advantages. Is a great passer, even for all the stuff he does that's kind of BS. Like, a lot of the times, Terry is not playing with Tyler anymore, right? He doesn't have a guy who's going to create advantages for him. So he's over here trying to create something out of nothing, and he's just not that guy. It's proven to be true. And, like, even if you stop playing Terry forever for the rest of the time, guess what? They're not going to be a good fourth quarter team, unfortunately.
No, I know. That's the thing. It's like, it's kind of what Sean says. No matter what they do, I don't think they're going to completely fix this. There are things they can do to make it not quite so bad. And that would be one of those things.
But it's like unsustainable stuff, like playing Tyler and Bam almost the entire fourth quarter. Like, other teams don't have to do that.
Or playing Burks and hope that he hits a couple threes in a game and that. But
I miss Haywood.
You're not getting any creation, right? But you're not getting any creation from Haywood either. I mean, I would look potentially at maybe sitting Tyler for the last 4 minutes of the third and bringing him back to play the whole fourth, which he used to do, by the way. Remember there was that run where he played Tyler 25 straight games the entire fourth
he said it with Terry, so he could do it with Tyler.
Right? So he could do it with Tyler. So maybe that's it, because maybe when you fall behind, okay, and you give up the lead during those last 4 minutes of the third quarter, because you will give it all up, then at least you have 12 minutes to fix it. I just feel like there's not enough time. Jimmy could fix it in a short period of time, in part because he stopped the clock. That was a big part of it. Jimmy's ability to get to the line and slow down the game and stop the clock. So we were all like, okay, 8
good
minutes,
shots.
Create good shots, right? For him or for others. Now, we didn't like some of the BS that he threw up at the end of the games when he started to play hero ball and the one-legged shit and everything else.
They were a pretty good clutch team. Like, they those long playoff runs, a lot of it was because they were a good clutch team. And then a couple seasons ago when they made the finals run and they had, that record amount of clutch games, they were winning a good amount of them because of
one of the reasons, but Alex, one of the reasons they were a good clutch team was because they were really good defensively. And he got to the line.
So now you don't have either of those things.
You don't have either of those things. So his ability to get to the line and then they could set up their defense. Okay. That was big in them being good in the clutch. They don't have that right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just scrambling in transition on defense. Bless you.
Excuse me. Thank you. Bless the Heat in the fourth quarter. So essentially we have no answer to this. I just think it could get less bad. I think if he tightens the reins a little bit where, okay, this group's not working, I'm not going to give this 4 more possessions to figure itself out. I think he's got to lean on playing Bam more minutes. The excuse of, well, he's got to anchor the whole defense and do everything, that's not there anymore. He's playing with an elite defensive point guard in the starting lineup. Wiggins is a plus defensive player. Okay, so even though you're not playing Highsmith now, he's got more good defenders out there with him, and he's got Ware in there to help him rebound. Although I wish Ware rebounded a little differently sometimes, but he's got Ware in there to help him rebound. So that excuse about you can give Bam the extra 2 to 3 minutes now, I think, where he doesn't have to anchor everything on the defensive end all the time. So I think you let him play through some of that stuff. You tighten up with whether it's the timeouts. A lot of times these timeouts are coming after 12-0, 13-0 runs. I think the quicker stuff, like Pop, okay, that was always Pop's thing. Phil Jackson, it's funny because the Heat obviously have nothing in common with Phil Jackson, right? Pat's had issues with Phil for years and all that. Phil's never been
opposites.
They're complete opposites. But Spo does this thing sometimes like Phil did, which is the kind of let him figure it out thing. Not to that extreme. Nobody did it like Phil. Phil literally would not call timeout for a quarter, okay, and just walk away and not even pay any attention to any of them, all right, and go to his peyote or whatever.
Oh,
Spo's not doing that, okay? Spo's not doing that. But it's sometimes he does try to let them sort of work through it, and whereas Pop. You've seen Pop. Pop would come in, and I've got best wishes to Pop, okay, and everything that he's dealing with right now. Pop would in the first 30 seconds, he didn't like the way that they were doing. Get your ass over here, okay? And I think sometimes that's needed just to stop the momentum, particularly on the road.
And with those
Particularly
lineups.
on the road. Yes.
Lineups that are prone
Yeah.
to mistakes and that are just, for years now, even if it's different guys, right? When the best players are not in those lineups, beginning of the fourth quarter, like we've been talking about. Yeah, you're right. He should probably, probably call timeouts a little bit earlier. And it's one thing to say like, oh, it's easy to say with hindsight after one game, but this has been like a recurring problem. And again, I think it all just comes back down to if the solution is playing your best players an unsustainable amount of time, it just goes back to the roster construction issue and just all the stuff that's upside down, like we've been talking about all show. This is what they, like Spo is working with the pieces he's given. Now, I'm not saying I agree with everything. I'm not saying he can't be criticized, because I've criticized him plenty today and other times for certain decisions he's made. But it's like, to be fair, and I'm not trying to disrespect any of these guys, I feel like we're pretty fair on what they can and can't do. He's trying to make chicken soup out of chicken shit. I don't know if that's how you say the phrase, and leaning back into that thing where I don't know how to say phrases properly. But that's
salad, salad or soup, yes, either way, it's not tasty. Right now.
It was salad. I always mess it up.
Either way, so I think what we're saying is this is a collective problem. It's a roster problem. It's in their transition to a new build.
Go bail us out, Tyler.
Issue.
That's the fourth quarter for them.
Pretty much is. It pretty much is, and he has at times. And that's why, again, he's going to commit some turnovers down the stretch. His turnover numbers go up late in the game. That's obvious. He's being blitzed, and he's done a much better job. Yesterday, we saw the fouls, him getting to the line. If that's a continuing trend, we'll do a whole episode on that. And he's obviously learned how to use his body and kind of draw the fouls, and that's a real positive for them. There are positives that are happening here, like Spoelstra said. But the end result of this is, and the numbers don't lie, okay, that you give them a lead, they're going to cough it up. And that is something that he and his staff need to figure out. All right, we'll see if they figure it out tonight against Atlanta. Check out our sponsors, All Pro Construction Builders, PrizePicks. Use the code FIVE.
Thank you for listening to the 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. After all, someone needs to listen to my dad.